In the middle of a violent September hurricane that swept across upstate New York in 1989, an Oscar-winning actor slowed his truck after spotting two soaked figures slumped against the brick wall of an abandoned service station. A young woman was holding her elderly mother in her arms, trying to shield her from the freezing rain with nothing but her own thin coat and the last of her strength. When the actor stepped out into the storm and ran toward them, the woman looked up with eyes that carried the kind of exhaustion that comes only from losing everything in a matter of weeks. Without hesitation, he carried both women into his truck, never imagining that a single photograph taken from across the road would explode across every tabloid in America within 72 hours. By the end of that week, his name would be on the front page of 3 newspapers. His wife would receive a phone call at 6:14 in the morning from a manager she had known for 9 years. And the only 2 people who could tell the world what really happened that night were a fired nurse and her 72-year-old mother, who was beginning to forget her own daughter's face. Before we begin, this is a fictional story inspired by the quiet generosity that Mr. Denzel Washington has been known for throughout his career. At Memory Stories, we believe that one moment of compassion taken at the right time can change more lives than the world will ever see. The windshield wipers on the 1988 Ford Bronco were losing. Denzel Washington gripped the steering wheel with both hands, leaning forward in his seat as he tried to make out the road through the curtain of rain. Hurricane Hugo had made landfall in South Carolina 2 days earlier, but its remnants had swung north and collided with a cold front over the Adirondacks. The forecast that morning had called for scattered showers. This was not scattered showers. This was the sky cracking open over Route 73 with a kind of fury that pushed his truck 2 feet sideways on every gust. He should have stayed in Mount Vernon. He should have waited until the weekend, accepted Pauletta's suggestion to fly the family up on Saturday instead. But his mother, Lennis Washington, had called him on the morning of the 21st with a tone in her voice he had not heard in years. She had finally cleaned out the attic of the old cabin in Lake Placid, the one his father had built with his own hands in the summer of 1962, and she had found something, a leather-bound notebook, 30 years of his father's private sermons, the ones he had never preached. Lennis had asked Denzel gently but firmly to come get them himself, not to send anyone, not to hire someone, to come, because his father had written his name on the inside cover of the black notebook in 1971, and Lennis believed those pages were meant for him. So here he was at 9:43 p.m. on the 23rd of September, alone in his father's old truck, fighting a storm that should not have existed in this part of the country. The cabin of the Bronco smelled of 3 things: worn leather from the original upholstery, warm engine oil from the heater, and the faint sweetness of peppermint, because Pauletta had tucked a small tin into the cup holder before he pulled out of the driveway in Mount Vernon. She had not said anything about the storm warnings. She had only said, "Drive slow, baby, call me when you stop." He had not stopped yet. The dashboard clock blinked from 9:43 to 9:44. The cassette deck was playing a tape his father had made on Sunday, May 17, 1987, exactly 6 months before the second stroke that took half his speech. The sermon was on Luke chapter 10, the Good Samaritan. The Reverend's voice was deep and unhurried, the way it had always been when he reached the part of a sermon he wanted his congregation to actually remember. The man came near. He did not pass by. He did not look for an excuse. He stopped. Denzel had heard this sermon 11 times. He played it on long drives. Something about hearing his father's voice in the cab of the truck made the loneliness of the highway feel less complete. Then he saw them. At first, he thought they were trash bags piled against the brick wall of the old Buckner Brothers Sunoco station, the one that had been closed since the bypass was completed in 1981. The sign above the boarded windows was still bolted to the front, half rusted, swinging on a single hinge in the wind. The figures were partially sheltered by a sagging overhang that was doing almost nothing to keep the rain off them. The smaller one moved. Denzel hit the brakes. The Bronco fishtailed slightly on the wet pavement before it settled on the shoulder. He threw it into park, grabbed the heavy yellow flashlight from the glove box, and pushed the door open against the wind. The cold hit him like a wall. The rain was 46 degrees, hard and slanted, and within 4 seconds his denim jacket was soaked through the shoulders. He did not stop to put on a coat. He ran. "Hello," his voice was nearly swallowed by the wind. "Are you all right?" The larger figure raised her head. A black woman in her late 30s, dark hair plastered to her forehead in wet curls, her arms wrapped tightly around an older woman who looked to be at least 70. The younger woman's lips were a faint shade of blue, and her hands were shaking so badly that she could not properly grip the smaller woman's shoulder. "Please," her voice cracked. "Please don't call anyone. Please, ma'am, you're both going to die out here. They'll take her." The woman's eyes were wide and exhausted, and the kind of frightened that has nothing to do with strangers in the rain. "They'll take her from me. Please." Denzel dropped to one knee on the wet pavement. The older woman in the tan coat was conscious but barely. Her eyes drifted across his face without quite focusing, the way the eyes of someone with Alzheimer's drift when they are trying very hard to find a memory and cannot. "Walter," the older woman whispered. "Walter, is that you?" "My name is Denzel, ma'am. I'm here to help, Walter." "You're so wet. Come inside, baby." The younger woman closed her eyes. "Mama, it's not Walter. Daddy passed 11 years ago." "Oh," a pause. "Oh, I know that." Denzel looked at the younger woman. "What is your name, Denise?" Her teeth were chattering hard. "Denise Crawford. This is my mother, Mirabelle." "How long have you been out here, Denise, since the bus?" She tried to remember. Maybe 4 hours, maybe 5. There was a bus from Plattsburgh, but the driver wouldn't let her on without the right ticket, and I didn't have enough cash for both fares, so we got off at the last stop in Shroon Lake, and we tried to walk. You walked in this. There wasn't anywhere else to go. Denzel made a decision in the space of 2 seconds. He stood up, opened the rear door of the Bronco, and ran back. "I'm putting you both in the back. The heater is already on. Do not argue with me, ma'am. I can't pay you. I did not ask you to." He lifted Mirabelle first. She weighed less than 110 pounds, soaked through and trembling, and when he settled her on the back seat, she patted his cheek with a hand that felt like cold paper. "Such a nice boy," she murmured. "Such a nice boy." Denise tried to walk to the truck on her own. She made it 3 steps before her left knee gave out. Denzel caught her before she hit the pavement and half-carried her the rest of the way. She did not fight him, but she also did not lean against him more than she absolutely had to. He recognized the particular posture of a woman who had spent her whole life refusing to need anyone. He shut the rear door, climbed into the driver's seat, and turned the heat all the way up. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Anywhere with a roof." Denise's voice was very small. "I'm sorry, I don't know where we are anymore. My family has a cabin about 9 miles up this road. It's empty tonight. I'm going to take you there, get you warm, and call a doctor. Is that all right?" She looked at him in the rearview mirror. Really looked. Her eyes traveled across his face the way a person reads a contract, line by line, and then she nodded once. "All right." What Denzel did not see, because he was focused on getting the truck back on the road in 50-mile-an-hour gusts, was the dark gray sedan parked on the opposite shoulder, about 120 feet behind the abandoned station. He did not see the man in the driver's seat lower a Canon EOS camera with a 300mm telephoto lens. He did not see that man take 7 photographs through the rain in the span of 90 seconds. The man's name was Trevor Hollings. He was 42 years old, a freelance photojournalist who had been working with the Midnight Mirror tabloid for the past 6 years. 2 years earlier, Denzel had refused to grant him an interview about his late father, calling the request, in private, an invasion of grief. Trevor had not forgotten. The Washington cabin sat at the end of a private gravel road that wound a quarter-mile through white pines. Denzel had not been inside it since the summer of 1979. But he kept paying the property taxes and the heating bill, and his mother had a caretaker named Earl Pendergast drop by once a month to check on the pipes. The cabin had 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a wood stove in the main room, and a working telephone that his father had insisted on installing in 1968. Denzel got Mirabelle inside first, then Denise, then he started a fire in the wood stove using kindling that Earl had stacked by the back door. The temperature inside the cabin was 49 degrees according to the thermometer above the kitchen sink. He needed it to be 70. He picked up the rotary phone in the kitchen and dialed a number he had memorized. Dr. Yolanda Beauchamp answered on the 3rd ring. She was 41 years old, a black woman, who had been in his graduating class at Fordham in 1977, and she had moved her family practice from Manhattan to Lake Placid 8 years ago because her husband wanted to teach skiing. Denzel, it's almost 10 o'clock. Yolanda, I have 2 women here. Hypothermia. The older one is roughly 72 with what looks like early-stage dementia. The younger one is mid-30s, exhausted, possibly malnourished. I picked them up off the side of Route 73. A pause, the sound of a chair being pushed back. Get the older one out of her wet clothes. Wrap her in dry blankets. Not hot ones, just dry. Warm broth if you have any. Do not put her near the stove. I will be there in 20 minutes. Denzel hung up. He walked into the main room. Denise was sitting on the edge of the couch, her hands gripping the cushion so hard her knuckles had gone pale, watching her mother, who was bundled in a wool throw, and staring at the wood stove with the kind of focus that has nothing to do with the fire. Doctor is on her way, he said. She's a friend. She won't ask any questions you don't want to answer. Why are you doing this? He sat down in the armchair across from her. The cabin smelled of cedar smoke and old books and damp wool, and somewhere in the back of his mind his father's voice was still saying he stopped. Because somebody had to. Denise looked at him for a long time. She had been holding herself together for so many hours that the act of being allowed to stop was making her shake harder, not less. You don't even know us. I know enough. Dr. Yolanda Beauchamp arrived at 10:27 p.m. with her medical bag, a thermos of warm chicken broth, and a calm professional energy that filled the room the moment she walked through the door. She checked Mirabelle first. Core temperature 94, 1 degrees, pulse weak but stable, pupils responsive. Mild confusion consistent with the Alzheimer's diagnosis, Denise quietly confirmed. She started a slow warming protocol and an IV for fluids. Denise was 66 degrees on the ear thermometer when Yolanda first checked her, which meant her body had been running on willpower for hours. Slight dehydration, bruising on the left wrist that was not from tonight, a persistent dry cough. When did you last eat? Yolanda asked. Yesterday morning. There was half a sandwich I split with Mama. Yolanda did not react. She simply nodded, made a note, and went to warm more broth on the stove. While Mirabelle drifted in and out of sleep on the couch, Denise sat at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug. Denzel sat across from her. He did not push. He just made sure the mug stayed full. After 20 minutes, she started to talk on her own. I was a registered nurse at St. Ambrose Medical Center in Brooklyn, 11 years on the same floor. Geriatric care, mostly. I was good at it. I am good at it. She turned the mug in her hands. 3 months ago, a resident named Dr. Bertram Sterling made a charting error on a medication for a 91-year-old patient. He gave her twice the prescribed dose of a blood thinner. She had a hemorrhagic stroke that night and died 41 hours later. I was the one who flagged the chart. I filed an incident report at 6:00 in the morning before my shift ended. What happened? 2 weeks later, I was called into the office of Dr. Clissy Pemberton Sterling, Chief of Hospital Administration. She is Bertram Sterling's mother. Denzel set down his coffee. She told me an internal review had concluded that I was the one who administered the incorrect dose, and that I had attempted to cover it up by filing a false incident report. They had records that showed I had accessed the medication cabinet at 11:47 p.m. that night, which was true, because I always accessed the medication cabinet at that time for my rounds. They had a witness who said she had seen me in the patient's room without supervision, which was also true, because I checked on every patient on that floor every night. They had everything they needed to fire me without paying severance and to file a report with the state's office recommending suspension of my license. Did they file it? It's pending. The hearing is in 6 weeks. My union representative says I'll probably lose. And your mother? Denise's eyes filled with tears for the first time since he picked her up off the side of the road, but she did not let them fall. My mother lives in a small 2-story house on Hancock Street in Bed-Stuy. My father bought it in 1968 with money he saved from 22 years driving a city bus. It is paid off. It has been paid off since 1991, she swallowed. 3 days ago, a man named Reginald Hartfield came to the house with a contract. He owns a chain of senior living facilities, Silver Pines. He wants to buy the whole block to build a new flagship facility. He offered her $68,000 for a property that is worth $320,000. She refused. He came back the next day and tried to get her to sign during one of her bad afternoons when she doesn't always know who I am. What did you do? I threw him out of the house. And tonight he sent 2 men to the house at 6 o'clock to deliver an updated offer. One of them was carrying a clipboard. The other one wasn't. My mother got scared, and she asked me to take her somewhere safe, and she remembered we had a cousin in Lake Placid named Bertis. We don't have a cousin in Lake Placid named Bertis. We never have. But she remembered her, so we went. Denzel sat very still for a long moment. Denise, the hospital firing, and the man at the house. Are those the same situation? She looked at him. Really looked. He could see her trying to decide whether to say what she was about to say. Reginald Hartfield's name is on the donor wall of the geriatric wing at St. Ambrose Medical Center. He gave $800,000 in 1986. Dr. Lucinda Pemberton Sterling sits on the board of his foundation. They have dinner together every other Thursday at a private club on Park Avenue. You can prove that? I work the wing where the donor wall is. I served Lucinda Pemberton Sterling coffee at 3 different fundraising events. Denzel set his coffee down. He looked across the cabin at Mirabelle, who was now asleep, her breathing soft and even, the IV bag dripping slowly on its stand. He thought about his own mother, who at 71 was still sharp as a knife, but who would one day, maybe, need someone like Denise to protect her. Denise. She looked up. You are going to stay here tonight. Tomorrow morning, we are going to call a lawyer my wife trusts. Her name is Adrian Whitlock. She is in Albany. She is going to know what to do, Mr. Washington. Denzel, I cannot pay you. I have not asked you to. I am not going to ask you to. She looked at him for another long moment. My mother had a son before me. He died at 9 months from a defect in his heart. His name was Walter. She called my father Walter for 36 years, even though his name was Marcus, because she couldn't remember which one of them she had lost first. Denzel did not say anything. He just listened. I am not going to be the one who lets her lose the house too. You are not going to be, Doctor. Yolanda Beauchamp stayed at the cabin until 1:14 in the morning. Before she left, she pulled Denzel aside near the back door. They are both going to be all right, physically. The older woman needs continuous care and a memory specialist, not just a regular doctor. The younger woman needs about 3 weeks of food and sleep before she will be operating at full strength. And mentally? Yolanda looked at him. She is one of the toughest people I have met in a long time, but she is also at the end of her rope. Be careful with her. She does not know how to accept help. I noticed also. Yolanda paused. Denzel, a car has been parked at the bottom of the access road since I got here. Dark gray sedan. The driver has not gotten out. He has not driven away. I drove past him very slowly when I came in, and he had his head down like he was looking at his lap. Denzel walked to the front window of the cabin and looked down the long gravel driveway. He could see the faint shape of a parked car at the bottom, partially obscured by the white pines. There were no headlights, no movement. How long has he been there, he asked. At least an hour and a half. The first call came at 6:14 in the morning to the Washington residence in Mount Vernon. Pauletta Washington had been awake since 5:30, making coffee in her bathrobe, listening to the rain that had finally moved off the coast overnight. She picked up the kitchen phone on the second ring. Pauletta, it's Howard. I need you to brace yourself. Howard Greer had been Denzel's manager for 9 years. He was the godfather of John David, their oldest. He did not call before 9 a.m. unless something was wrong. What is it? The Midnight Mirror is running a cover story this morning. They are printing 4 million copies. The headline reads, Oscar winner's secret family Hollywood star photographed at Adirondack hideaway with mystery woman and mother-in-law. There are photographs, Pauletta, 3 of them. Denzel carrying a woman in her late 30s into the cabin in Lake Placid. They are running a sidebar suggesting he has been supporting them financially for over a decade. The coffee mug in Pauletta's hand did not shake. She set it down on the counter, very carefully, the way a person sets down something fragile. Then she walked across the kitchen, into the small study that had been Denzel's father's library for 14 years before he passed, and she opened the second drawer of the oak desk. Inside, under a stack of children's drawings the kids had given Denzel for Father's Day in 1987, was a photograph she had not looked at in 3 years. It was a black and white picture from 1976. Denzel was 22 years old, just graduated from Fordham, standing on the steps of his father's church in Buffalo. Reverend Washington had his hand on his son's shoulder, and they were both laughing at something off camera. Pauletta did not remember who had taken the picture. She just remembered Denzel telling her once that this was the day his father said to him, "Your work in this world is to be the same man, whether anyone is watching or not." She looked at the photograph for a long 30 seconds. She walked back to the kitchen. Howard was still on the line. "Pauletta, are you there?" "I'm here, Howard. I have to ask. Do you know who the woman is?" "No, and you are not concerned?" She picked up her coffee. The mug was still steady in her hand. "Howard, I have been married to Denzel Washington for 15 years. I know who he is. I know who he is when nobody is looking, because that is the only version of him there is. The Midnight Mirror does not know him. The photographer does not know him. You and I and a handful of other people in this world know him. So no, I am not concerned about my marriage. I am concerned for my husband, because someone has gone to a lot of trouble to hurt him, and I want to know why." She paused. "Howard, I want you to call Adrian Whitlock in Albany. Right now, wake her up. I want her in Lake Placid by noon. I want a full counterstatement drafted by 2 p.m. And I want the name of every editor at the Mirror who touched this story on my desk by tomorrow morning. After that, you sit by your phone, because I am going to need you to make a lot of calls today, and I need you to make them the right way." "I'll do it." Howard's voice had shifted. The professional manager was gone. What was left was something quieter and more personal. "Pauletta, I have known your husband for 9 years. He is the best man I have ever worked with. I am not making these calls because it is my job. I am making them because he is my friend." "I know, Howard. That's why I am asking you." She hung up, walked back to the cradle, and lifted the receiver again. She dialed the Lake Placid cabin from memory because she had memorized that number when she first started dating Denzel in 1982. He picked up on the second ring. "Pauletta, you stopped for someone." "2 women, a nurse and her mother. The mother has Alzheimer's. They were stranded on Route 73 in the storm last night. Pauletta, the situation is bigger than they realize, and someone has been photographing me." "I know," Howard just called. "There is a story going to print this morning." A long silence. "Pauletta, I am so sorry. Denzel Hayes Washington, if you apologize to me one more time, I am going to drive up there myself and slap you. You did exactly what your father raised you to do. Now you take care of those 2 women. That is your job today. Adrian and Howard and I will take care of the rest. Are we clear?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Tell Mirabelle I said good morning. She likes that. How do you know her name?" "Because you told me 10 seconds ago. Pay attention, baby." She hung up the phone. Howard Greer called Adrian Whitlock at 6:47 a.m. from his kitchen in Englewood, New Jersey. His wife Marcella was at the table with a cup of tea, watching him pace. "What is going on?" she asked when he finally hung up. "A tabloid is running a story about Denzel." "It's not true." "How do you know?" Howard stopped pacing. He looked at his wife of 23 years. "Because I have worked with that man for 9 years, Marcella. I have watched him write $30,000 checks to causes he doesn't even put his name on. I have watched him sit with my mother for 2 hours when she was dying, because I couldn't get out of a meeting. I have watched him refuse 3 movies that would have made him an extra $2 million each, because the scripts didn't sit right with him. That is the man I know. The man in this story is not him. What are you going to do?" "I am going to start calling people. I am going to call them until somebody listens." He started with the news director at WCBS Radio, a man named Philip Trent, who owed him 3 favors. He worked his way down a list of 17 names by 9 a.m. Dr. Yolanda Beauchamp got the call from a reporter at 8:35 a.m. The reporter was from the Albany Times-Union, and he was asking her to confirm that she had been at the Washington cabin the previous night. "I was," she said. "Can you describe what you saw?" She was sitting in her own kitchen, looking out at her backyard where the last of the rain was finally tapering off. She thought about her career. She thought about the 15 years of practice she had built in Lake Placid, the patient list she had been so careful to cultivate, the reputation in town for being the doctor who minded her own business and her patient's business and nothing else. "I have known Denzel Washington for 12 years, she said. "We graduated from Fordham in 1977. He called me at 9:48 p.m. last night because 2 women were dying of hypothermia in his back seat. I treated them. The older woman has advanced dementia. The younger woman is recovering from what looks like several weeks of malnutrition. They are both alive because that man stopped his truck in a hurricane to help them. Do you mind if I quote you? Print my full name. Yolanda Beauchamp, M.D. Spell it correctly. She hung up the phone. She made another cup of coffee. She did not regret it. Earl Pendergast, the caretaker, was in his workshop sharpening a chainsaw when the first reporters arrived at the bottom of the gravel driveway at 9:22 a.m. He was 64 years old, had served 3 tours in Korea between 1951 and 1953, and had been taking care of the Washington property since 1973. He walked down the driveway in his work boots and his canvas coat. "You boys lost? We are with the Albany Herald. We are trying to reach Denzel Washington. You are not going to reach him from my driveway." "Sir, the public has a right to know what is going on here." Earl considered the man who had spoken. He set his coffee down on the gatepost. "I have been taking care of the Washington family's property for 16 years. I knew Denzel's father. I have known Denzel since he was a young man bringing his girlfriend up here to introduce her to his daddy. That family is a good family. I am not telling you anything else, and you are not driving up this road. Now move your vehicles, please. I have work to do." The reporters did not move immediately. Earl walked back up to his workshop, picked up his telephone, and called the Lake Placid Sheriff's Office. The reporters were gone by 10:15 a.m. In the cabin, Denzel made breakfast. He scrambled eggs, he toasted bread, he sliced an apple into thin pieces because Yolanda had said Mirabelle could handle thin pieces of fruit but not whole bites. He set the table for 3. Mirabelle came to the table holding Denise's hand, walking carefully because the rug in the hallway had a fold she did not understand. She sat down. She looked at the plate Denzel set in front of her. "Waller, did you make this?" Denzel did not correct her. He just sat down across from her. "Yes, ma'am. I hope you like apples. I love apples, Walter. Do you remember the time we drove out to the orchard in Schenectady?" "I remember," he said. Denise looked at him from across the table. Her eyes were wet, but she was not crying. Denzel poured her coffee. He set the cream and sugar within reach. He did not say anything. The morning paper arrived at 11:08 a.m., carried up the driveway by Earl himself in a plastic bag to keep it dry. He set it on the kitchen counter without comment and left. Denise read the headline. The photographs were grainy but clear enough. The framing was suggestive. The captions did the rest. "Mr. Washington, Denzel. This is going to ruin your career." Denzel was washing the breakfast dishes. He did not look up. "I am not worried about that today." "How are you not worried?" He turned off the water. He dried his hands. He sat down at the table across from her. "Denise, I have a wife who knows me. I have 4 children who know me. I have a manager and a doctor and a lawyer and a caretaker who all know me. They are going to handle the part of this that needs handling. My job today is to make sure your mother eats lunch and to figure out where we are going to sleep tonight and to call Adrian when she gets here. That is all I have to do today. You're not even going to read the article?" "I am not going to read the article." "Why?" He thought about it for a moment. "Because I already know what it says, and because reading it would not help your mother eat lunch." Adrian Whitlock arrived at the cabin at 12:51 p.m. in a dark green Volvo with 2 associates and a bound case file. She was 53 years old, a black woman who had practiced family and civil litigation in upstate New York for 27 years. And she had been on retainer with the Washington family since 1986. She came in. She greeted Mirabelle by name and asked after her morning. She sat down with Denise at the kitchen table and listened to her account of the firing at St. Ambrose for 58 minutes without interruption, taking notes in a leather portfolio with a fountain pen. When Denise finished, Adrian closed the portfolio. "Ms. Crawford, I am going to ask you some questions, and I need you to answer them honestly, even if the answer is something you are not proud of. Okay, the medication cabinet at St. Ambrose. Does it have an electronic log since 1987? Every access is recorded with a timestamp and a nurse ID. Can you access your own records? No, but the state nursing board can under subpoena. The witness who said she saw you in the patient's room. Do you know who she was? Helen Krieger, day shift charge nurse. She and I have worked together for 9 years. She did not see me in that room that night. She could not have because she was off duty. Her shift ended at 7 p.m. Adrian nodded slowly. She made one more note, then she closed the portfolio. "I am going to handle this. I want you both to stay here this week. Earl will bring groceries. Dr. Beauchamp will check on your mother every other day. You are going to rest, Miss Crawford. That is the most important thing you can do for me right now. What is Denzel going to do? Adrian smiled for the first time that day. He is going to do what he is already doing. He is going to take care of you and your mother. He is going to let me and his wife do our jobs. She left at 1:43 p.m. with a list, 3 signed authorizations, and a fountain pen that had dried out from running so much ink that morning. By Thursday, the story had begun to change. Helen Krieger called Adrian's office on Wednesday afternoon. Helen had not slept properly in 3 nights, and she had read the Mirror article in the break room at St. Ambrose on Monday morning. And on Tuesday evening she had watched a television interview with Dr. Yolanda Beauchamp on a local Albany news station. She did not know Yolanda, but Yolanda had said 2 sentences that Helen could not stop replaying. Denise Crawford has been a nurse for 11 years. She has spent 11 years showing up. Helen had picked up the phone on Wednesday at 4:17 p.m. and dialed Adrian Whitlock's office. She had told Adrian the entire truth. She had also given her the names of 2 other nurses who had been pressured by Dr. Pemberton Sterling's office to sign statements they had not written. Adrian's investigator pulled the electronic medication cabinet logs from St. Ambrose under emergency subpoena on Thursday morning. The logs showed 3 things that the hospital had not disclosed in its internal review. Denise Crawford had accessed the cabinet at 11:47 p.m. on the night in question, exactly as she had said. The dose of the blood thinner had been administered at 11:53 p.m., and the nurse ID logged at the moment of administration was not Denise Crawford's. It was Dr. Bertram Sterling's. He had logged in under his own ID. He had administered the wrong dose himself. And then someone had quietly reassigned the chart entry the following morning. The donor records of St. Ambrose Medical Center, also obtained under subpoena, showed that Reginald Hartfield had given $800,000 to the geriatric wing in 1986, an additional $215,000 in 1988, $190,000 in early 1989, and a personal gift of $30,000 directly to the office of Dr. Lucinda Pemberton Sterling in July of the same year. The IRS filings of the Hartfield Foundation listed her as a paid board member, earning $24,000 per year for what was described as advisory services. By Friday morning at 10:18 a.m., Adrian Whitlock filed 3 motions in 3 different courts: a wrongful termination suit against St. Ambrose Medical Center, a civil rights complaint against Dr. Lucinda Pemberton Sterling, and an emergency injunction against Reginald Hartfield's Silver Pines Holdings, blocking any further contact with Mirabelle Crawford or the property at 247 Hancock Street. At 11:45 a.m. that same morning, Pauletta Washington stepped to a podium at the offices of Whitlock and Associates in Albany. She was wearing a navy suit and no makeup. There were 43 journalists in the room. Denzel was not present. He had told Pauletta on the phone the night before that he wanted to stay at the cabin with Mirabelle and Denise. Pauletta had told him to stay. She had said, "This is for me to say, baby. You stay where you are. My husband stopped his truck on the side of the road last Saturday night because a woman was holding her elderly mother in the freezing rain, and no one else had stopped for them in over 4 hours. He brought them to our family cabin because there was nowhere else to take them in the middle of a hurricane. He called a doctor. He helped get them warm. He made them breakfast the next morning. He has not given a single interview, and he is not going to, because that is not who he is." She paused. "I am going to tell you who he is. He is a man who calls his mother every Sunday. He is a man who reads his children to sleep when he is in town. He is a man who has kept the same wife and the same friends for over a decade, and who pays his taxes, and who tips well, and who answers his own phone when his manager calls at 7 in the morning. He is a man who, when he saw 2 women dying on the side of a road, stopped his truck. That is who he is. And anyone who knows him will tell you the same thing." She gestured to the side of the room. "I would also like to introduce Denise Crawford." Denise walked to the podium. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice was steady. "My name is Denise Crawford. I am 38 years old. I was a registered nurse at St. Ambrose Medical Center for 11 years until I was fired in July for an incident I did not cause and tried to report. The Washington family did not know me before last Saturday night. They have asked nothing of me. They have asked only that I be allowed to tell the truth. The truth is that an Oscar-winning actor stopped his truck for two women he had never met in a hurricane and refused to drive past. The truth is that for the last week, he has not asked me a single question about myself that wasn't to make sure I was eating. The truth is that I have spent 11 years watching what happens when no one stops. That is the whole story. The rest is people trying to make a profit off the fact that he is famous and I am not. The room was silent for nearly 3 seconds before the first question came. The Midnight Mirror printed a retraction on the front page of its Monday edition. The retraction was 2,400 words long. It was the longest the Mirror had ever printed in its 41-year history. Trevor Hollings was sued personally for defamation. His professional credentials were revoked by the New York Press Association the following month. The civil judgment against him exceeded $8 million. He never apologized. In a brief statement to the New York Post, he said he had taken the photographs because he believed the public had a right to see what powerful men did when they thought no one was watching. He did not retract this statement even after the retraction was printed. St. Ambrose Medical Center settled with Denise Crawford on October 17, 1989. The settlement included full reinstatement, 11 years of back pay differentials, and a written acknowledgement that the original firing had been based on falsified documentation. Denise did not return to St. Ambrose. She chose, instead, to accept a position as Director of Geriatric Nursing at a new facility being developed by a foundation Denzel had quietly established 3 weeks earlier, on the strong recommendation of his wife. Dr. Lucinda Pemberton Sterling was removed from her position as Chief of Hospital Administration on October 24th. She was indicted on charges of obstruction of justice, falsification of medical records, and conspiracy to commit fraud in February of 1990. She maintained throughout her trial that she had been protecting the reputation of the hospital and a young doctor with a promising career. She did not apologize during her sentencing. Reginald Hartfield's offer on the property at 247 Hancock Street was withdrawn under the terms of the injunction. The Silver Pines development was blocked by a coalition of 3 neighborhood associations after Adrian Whitlock made the donor records public. Hartfield filed for bankruptcy protection in March of 1990. He continued, in public statements, to insist that he had made a fair offer to an old woman who simply could not appreciate the value of progress. He did not apologize either. Mirabelle Crawford kept her house. Denise moved her own apartment into the 2nd floor and arranged for a memory specialist to visit twice a week. On good afternoons, Mirabelle sat on the porch and waved at the neighborhood children. On bad ones, she called for Walter. Denise answered to both names with the same gentleness. On a Sunday afternoon in late October, 6 weeks after the hurricane, Denzel drove back up to Lake Placid alone. The cabin smelled of cedar smoke and old books, the way it always had. He sat in the armchair by the wood stove with the black leather notebook his mother had asked him to find. He read his father's handwriting slowly. The last entry in the notebook was dated August 4, 1987, 3 months before the second stroke. His father had written in his careful preacher's hand, "To my son, who I hope will read this someday, the world will offer you many reasons to keep driving. Some of them will sound like good ones. Stop anyway. And then, when the world tries to punish you for stopping, do not fight it. Just keep stopping. The people who love you will fight for you. That is what love is for." Denzel closed the notebook. He sat for a long time in the quiet, listening to the wood stove and the wind in the white pines, and he thought about a young woman holding her mother in a hurricane, and about a tabloid photographer in a parked car, and about a wife who had looked at a photograph from 1976 and known immediately what to do. He picked up the rotary phone and dialed home. Pauletta answered on the second ring. "You all right, baby?" "I am all right. I am coming home tomorrow. The kids miss you." "I miss them, Denzel." "Yes, you did not have to fight for yourself this week." "I know. Do you know why?" He waited. "Because for 15 years you have been quietly fighting for everybody else. This week it was just our turn." He did not answer right away. "Tell the kids I love them," he said. "I will. Drive safe tomorrow." The foundation was incorporated on November 11, 1989, in the state of New York. Its founding document listed its mission as the protection of elderly women and single mothers from financial predation, medical retaliation, and systemic abandonment. It was named, at Denise Crawford's suggestion, the Samaritan Stop Foundation. The reference was not subtle. Neither was the work. By the end of 1995, the foundation had provided legal defense to 247 women in 7 states. It had blocked 38 elder property seizures. It had funded the reinstatement of 19 nurses who had been fired for reporting medical errors. It had built 2 memory care residences in Brooklyn and 1 in Albany. Mirabelle Crawford passed away peacefully in her sleep on March 3, 1996, in the house her husband had bought in 1968, with her daughter holding her hand. She had recognized Denise that morning. She had called her my girl. Denise Crawford served as executive director of the Samaritan Stop Foundation for the next 26 years. She retired in 2015 and was succeeded by a young woman she had personally mentored. The foundation continues its work today. Denzel Washington never gave an interview about that week. He never wrote about it. He never mentioned it in an acceptance speech. When a reporter asked him about it 10 years later at a press event in Los Angeles, he said only this: "A lot of people stopped for me that week. I just stopped for 2 people one night. That is not the same thing, and I want to be careful not to pretend it was." He never said anything else about it publicly. The truth is that he did not have to, because his wife stopped, his lawyer stopped, his manager stopped, his doctor stopped, his caretaker stopped, the nurses who had worked with Denise stopped, the neighbors on Hancock Street stopped, the reporters who eventually got the real story stopped, the judge who heard the case stopped, the strangers who read the retraction and chose to believe it stopped. The truth did not win because Denzel Washington fought for it. The truth won because for 15 years he had been quietly building a life that other people were willing to fight for when the time came. That is the part of the story that does not fit on a magazine cover. It is also the only part that matters. Sometimes the world does not need a hero with superpowers. It needs a man who is willing to stop his truck in a hurricane. It needs a wife who answers the phone at 6:14 in the morning and tells her husband to keep doing the right thing. It needs a nurse who files an incident report even when she knows what it will cost her. It needs a lawyer who reads donor records on a Saturday night. It needs a caretaker who turns reporters away from a gravel driveway. It needs a doctor who prints her full name in a newspaper because the truth is more important than her own quiet practice. It needs people who do not pass by. And it needs the rest of us to keep being the kind of people that other people will one day be willing to stop for. If this story moved you, even a little, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need it today, and subscribe to Memory Stories. We have many more stories like this one, and the only way they reach the people who need them is if you help us share them. And tell us in the comments, has there ever been a moment in your life when one stranger stopped for you, and you have never forgotten? Or a moment when you were the one who stopped? We read every comment, and your story may be the one that helps someone else tonight.